Right. Okay. So, Jenna, if you wouldn't mind letting folks in as they're coming in, that would be super helpful. Appreciate that. So I just wanted to, like I said, introduce myself. I'm Rachel Sample. Had the chance to interact and say hello to most of you last week, but if you weren't here for last week's session with all of the Continuum of Care grantees, this is my, quick introduction to you. I am the manager of the team that oversees the CoC Emergency Solutions Grant and HOPWA funding, as well as the COVID relief funding through ESG and HOPWA. So a couple of things I wanted to do today is spend some time defining terminology. I also wanted to kind of go over the timeline for you all as DV bonus subrecipients and what that kind of looks like. Obviously very similar to everybody else, but since you guys are kind of applying under one application, when we do submit to HUD, it just kind of feels a little bit different once we get things moving. I wanted to also just check in with you on some recent fiscal year spending for DV bonus funding, and then also talk to you more about how CoC policies, as it relates to the funding competition, interact with DV bonus funding. So, if you are new to the continuum of care funding space, maybe you're new in your position, or your agency was recently funded, or you've changed jobs, or for whatever reason, want to just identify a couple of key terms. I also recognize that because of the way this funding was originally awarded, both that it was originally with ICADV, and since it's come over here, you guys maybe have less of an interaction with some of the HUD related terms that you might hear from us or me during renewal time, that there may be some, misunderstanding or just a lack of clarity on what some of this terminology means. So I just want to take a couple of minutes to define some of these terms. First, I wanted to share with you, the process really begins with a grant inventory worksheet, and we'll talk about what that is a little bit later. But essentially, the grant inventory worksheet is a record for all the grants that are eligible for renewal in the competition. You guys, as individual agencies, all have your own award with IHTDA, but you're all under one large grant. So when the grant inventory worksheet becomes available, you actually all appear in one big group. So you wouldn't see your individual agency listed, you just see DV bonus rapid rehousing. So it is kind of a thing, and I am going to clarify more about the difference between grants and projects and awards in a moment. A reallocation of funding is when we shift funds either in whole or in part from one project to a new project. Reallocation is typically done to kind of right size a grant. So maybe you applied and you didn't have access to as many housing units as you thought you would. So even though you have high demand, because it's rare that we don't have the demand we thought we were going to have, right? We always have folks in need, but maybe we aren't able to, get as many units onboarded as we thought. Maybe you decide to right size your grant that way and reduce your award by a small amount, or maybe a larger amount. We do have sometimes projects that choose to reallocate their whole entire award because they're not interested in pursuing the CoC funding anymore. We just had that happen last year, actually. So it either in part or in whole. And reallocation can happen because the agency voluntarily does it, or because the CoC board determines that the reallocation needs to happen in order to successfully apply for funding. A consolidation is when we apply combine two projects together under the same grant. The projects have to be the same type. So a rapid rehousing project and a rapid rehousing project. Our friends over at A Better Way actually have in this last competition consolidated several of their rapid rehousing projects together. That's just an ease for those of you who are kind of operating more than one CoC grant to consolidate those down. Again, because your TH to RH and rapid rehousing DV projects are already under one grant, it's not something you would do, but if you hear us talk about that term, that's what that means. And expansion is when we add funding to an existing grant through the competition. So when you go to apply, you essentially say, I would like to apply for a new project, but it's going to be an expansion. And HUD will then ask you to say, well, what grant are you tying this to? And what, how much money and what are you doing with it, and so on and so forth. And then the renewal application, or how we refer to it at Balance of State, the IRPA, Internal Renewal Program Application, IRPA, is essentially what renewals submit every year, renewal projects to competitively apply for renewal. CoC funding has to be a competitive application. It's defined within the regulation, requires that we use a scoring criteria to evaluate projects. It can't be a formulaic award. It's not allowed by statute. So now we got a couple other terms on our circle here. The NOFO, used to be called the NOFA, or Notice for Funding Opportunity, is HUD's process for applying for CoC funds. So when we go in and submit your renewals, we are submitting the NOFO application to HUD to do that. DV bonus was a type of funding that was added to the NOFO, the HUD defined process, several years ago. So if you were receiving CoC money in the past, or know anybody who was, it used to be that there wasn't a dedicated group of funding in the competition that was just for DV projects. It's something that came through several years ago. And just like the regular NOFO process, inside the NOFO, where the DV bonus information is, it defines the types of projects we can apply for, what the eligible criteria are for an applicant, all those kinds of things. And then it also defines the separate competition that happens for DV bonus projects. And we can talk about that more if you are curious to learn more about that. You as renewal projects are not a part of that competitive DV bonus process. You are just part of the full competitive application to HUD. So there isn't a need for you to worry about, trying to get the DV bonus funding anymore. You've already been awarded funding by HUD, and you're submitted with all the other renewal projects when we go to renew. So you're not part of that special set aside anymore. The ranking process is the list that describes the CoC's priority of where we are requesting funds to be allocated. So again, because the competition process by HUD's definition is competitive, we have to list projects in order of their performance. And that's what our policies state that we'll do. And so when we list projects that are, grants that are renewing, you'll see them listed, and you'll see a score next to them. Then finally, that collaborative application, that's the detailed application that IHCDA works on, that essentially describes the achievements of the continuum of care, that whole network of service providers across the state to address homelessness. It's not just questions about what we've done with CoC money. It's about what we do as a state. What plans do we have? What things are we executing? They want to hear about everything we're doing. So it's pretty intensive. So just want to kind of take a quick moment to clarify the difference between a project and a grant. So in the continuum of care program, you have grants and then you have individual projects. And sometimes I try not to use the term award because that can be a little bit confusing. And I try to just use the term project. So a CoC grant is HUD allocated dollars to a single agency or group of agencies to complete activities related to a project type. So the DV bonus rapid rehousing grant is awarded to multiple agencies. We've got another grant from HUD called the CoC2 grant, and that actually has 2 agencies under it, and those agencies are both operating supportive housing projects. But then we also have both at IHCDA and individual subrecipient or individual HUD direct recipients that operate their own grants. So A Better Way operates a direct HUD rapid rehousing grant. We've got up in Gary, Sojourner Truth House operates the Gateway Supportive Housing Grant. So it can be a single agency, it can be multiple agencies operating under a grant. You'll see those listed in the grant inventory worksheet. If you do a quick Google, or you can recall from last year, any information that you saw being sent out from the CoC or from us about grant inventory worksheet, those are those big chunks of money. You'll see all the units and all the dollars kind of grouped together, even if it's multiple agencies that are under that grant. And like I said, the grants can have multiple projects. And it's even possible that subrecipient, I don't know why you do this, but maybe you would. If you were potentially operating in different communities, you could be operating 2 projects under 1 grant as an agency. I wouldn't really recommend that, but I guess it's kind of a version of what consolidation is ultimately. And then the CoC project, those are the individual executed projects with HUD or IHCDA. So HUD does do direct contracting with agencies. We have some agencies that choose to do that. It's less popular than it once was, but it's ultimately the agency's choice. You guys, since you already are a subrecipient of ours, and because of the grant type we're using, it's not possible for you to contract directly with HUD for your grant. You're still operating in partnership with IHCDA. So because a project can be a part of a grant with all their agencies, or it can be its own grant, you may see it listed on its own or as a part of a larger grant in something like the grant inventory worksheet. You'll also see that when you talk about things like data, the data is really tracked at a project level. So when we report up to HUD, the performance of, the CoC projects, we're reporting all of those individual annual performance reports. We're not like grouping all of the data and saying like, oh yeah, this is all one outcome for a single grant. You guys still have your own ability to run your performance for each of your individual projects. So if it's helpful to kind of see this visually, you'll see here that HUD is our funder. For you guys at the TH to RRH, or excuse me, I think I mislabeled these, but for those of you here, you've got your DV bonus grant, and then you've got your list of agencies. And then here's just kind of another example of how it might work. You've got HUD, and then the TH to RRH, and then the 3 subrecipients, but we also have a grant that operates through IHCDA and contracts with South Shore Commons, or excuse me, Sojourner Truth House for the South Shore Commons project. I don't know if it's helpful to kind of see this visually, but the reason I want to kind of specify that is because there are points in the CoC process where we are talking at a project level. And then as things kind of roll down the line, it kind of rolls up into a grant level when we're talking to HUD and submitting it into HUD. So what is the process for renewing a project during the competition? What does the DV bonus process look like for you all? And I'm going to call you guys DV bonus projects, but I just kind of want to reiterate, you've already been awarded your funding. So you're not, you are DV bonus projects, but you're not applying in the process under that competitive new funding. You're still getting your renewal award. So, your first process, obviously, you're going to be attending your sessions, and then you are going to be, we're going to check in with you about anything in the grant inventory worksheet related to your project. So I highlighted a couple things that are unique to you, right? You look a little different because you are operating under this larger grant. So if you were to just look at the GIW, you'd be like, we don't operate 72 units of rapid rehousing. We only operate 12. So, that's what I mean. Like, you're going to look at your stuff and make sure what you have in there is right and what we're reporting to HUD for you is correct. So you're not responsible for anything that's not under your agency. You also, as it relates to, as we move through this competition, are going to complete your IRPA. And maybe you're going to look at whether or not you need the funding that you're all receiving. Are you underspending on your current award that you're receiving from IHCDA? Do you that grant agreement you have with us, are you spending all of those funds, or are you consistently not spending? And there's some reasons why you may decide to voluntarily reallocate that money, and I'll talk about that later. You're also going to, when the time comes, review your scoring report. And like I said, let us know if you want to voluntarily reallocate. And then if you have anything in eSNAPs, we're never going to ask you to go into eSNAPs, but we may send you information from the eSNAPs application to say, does this look right? In particular, if there's anything related to the budget, like, are the counties that we have listed here correct for you? Is that still the FMRs we're going off of for those counties and things like that? And then as you kind of move through the process, you're also going to receive a project ranking. You're going to get to know, like, oh, hey, my project ranked here. And then when the time comes, we're actually going to be submitting your grant ranking to HUD. So I wanted to note a couple of things here. In this process, the CoC program policies for the balance of state allow you to appeal anything that happens from the time you submit your IRPA on. So if you submit your IRPA and you get your score back and you say, no, I disagree, that when I see this data, I see that we housed, we exited 100% of people to permanent housing and for whatever reason we scored your IRPA to say, oh, you said 90. You can appeal that. If you look at your ranking and you feel like your score was incorrectly scored, you can appeal that. The process of an appeal is something we'll talk about in the full conversation with all of projects, but just letting you know you have opportunities to give feedback and say, like, I don't think this is right. Could you take another look? Is built in a part of our process. And the one thing that's really nice is it's a fairly informal process to start with. If things need to escalate, they escalate appropriately, but we're not asking you to submit some like notarized letter to say, I disagree. The process is really fairly simple to implement if you decide you're concerned about what's going on with your project. Okay, so just a couple of things I wanted to go over with what's kind of been going on with the DV bonus funding. So if you look at all of our funding that we receive at CoC for permanent supportive housing, for rapid rehousing, transitional rapid rehousing, and coordinated entry, we obviously have our renewing projects that are not DV bonus projects, and we have our groupings of projects who are. And these three that I highlighted here are our projects that are DV bonus projects. So we have 1,487,684 in DV rapid rehousing. We have 275,000 in DV coordinated entry, and we have 579,912 in DV joint TH to RRH. When we look at spending, we see that we have, various levels of spending in our grants utilization. So again, this is across all grants, not any individual project. And, generally we've got some areas where we know we need to make some improvements. We're working a lot internally at IHTDA to improve our utilization of coordinated entry funds. Between the pandemic and staff turnover and capacity at agencies to kind of do things with CE, we've been pretty limited in our expenditures, but really excited to kind of do some new things this year to help improve that. But we do have some types of awards that traditionally kind of struggle to utilize all of their funds. When we look specifically at DV bonus and expenditures, I think the biggest concern, obviously, you're seeing this CE award, and we know we have to make some pretty drastic improvements here. We've been having a lot of conversations with our board. They are aware that this needs to get better. But I just kind of wanted to let you know kind of where this compares. So our TH to RRH award for DV bonus is utilized at 80% of the award right now. This is dollars spent, so it's not dollars allocated. And I want to specifically highlight this as we talk about the rapid rehousing. So in this most recent fiscal year 2020 that operated from 2021 to 2022, the grant that you guys just closed out last year, our utilization in rapid rehousing was 59%. Now, again, we know that we had some unallocated money. When grants transitioned over from ICADV, we had some folks decide to kind of change up whether they wanted to remain involved in the project or the grant, and we had some money kind of left that was not allocated out. That's one reason why we were excited to offer the opportunity for folks to apply for more rapid rehousing money in this last year, and we had the chance to expand a project and bring on a new subrecipient in order to do that. So I'm really hopeful that we'll see this number increase. And that this utilization will go up. I'm telling you all of this not because I'm passing any sort of judgment call on what's going on with each of your projects or your programs. I think this is just about you guys having the information about both what the spending and utilization is. And I want to, as we move into talking about policies related to spending, I don't want anyone to be taken by surprise in future conversations that may happen about spending. And in particular, I want to really highlight that this is a conversation because we know that administering these grants is complicated. And while we wish that every scenario was easy to predict and every client interaction was, smooth sailing, and you moved them in on the first week you met them and they, utilized all the rapid rehousing dollars you thought they would, that's not how people work, and we need money to work for people, and we know that. So this is truly a conversation, and me bringing this to your attention is not to make a judgment call on anyone to say, why aren't you spending? You should be spending more. This is to make you aware of what the spending is and to give you a heads up on some things that may happen in conversation down the line so that you're not taken by surprise by any information that you see in the future. So if you are somebody who has received CoC and ESG money, then you may kind of know this operates differently. If you've never received CoC and you've only ever gotten ESG, then maybe you didn't know that it worked this way. So emergency solutions grant funding, since I know a number of you guys are ESG recipients, it is actually designed in the way that, it has a multi-year spending period, right? You have 2 years to spend. It has a built-in reallocation time frame. Diane's actually doing it right now, right? She's looking at who's spent down all their funding, and then she's looking at what money's kind of left on the table and how to then get that money out the door and so it gets spent and serves people. So because CoC doesn't have built-in reallocation in its process, HUD doesn't require that we reallocate. But what they do is they strongly recommend that we reallocate when it's appropriate to, and they will, through the competition process, incentivize us aggressively reallocating funding. One of the things that happens in the competition is they'll say, have you, as an entire continuum of care, reallocated 20% of your total funding that you receive over the last 5 years? I can't remember the exact time frame, but it's 3 or 5 years. And if you can say yes to that question, you get extra points on your application. That HUD gets excited by the idea that you're constantly looking at how spending is working and how to right size grants, all of that, real performance-based criteria. This is not something that's designed or built in, though. We have the choice as a continuum of care, as a balance of state, on whether or not we would choose to reallocate. If it's not in the best interest of the people that we're serving to reallocate, then there's lots of reasons why we might not. Because awards are annual, you can't roll over your expenses or request additional funds. That's not something you can just do naturally. If you wanted to do something like get more money, you have to apply for an expansion, right? So it's not just built in as a part of your process to do this. And like I said, HUD relies on the CoC board, which is the entity responsible for, reporting up all of this to HUD on behalf of the whole continuum. We're their board, and me at IHTD, I'm responsible for telling the board, this is what was spent. And this is the information that subrecipients have given us about why, and and these kinds of things. And then the board makes the decision about whether or not they think that, reallocating or maybe a project just didn't serve anybody one year and the board wants to say, I know that sounds crazy, but trust me, it's happened. If you, underserved your grant by 50% and you only helped 5 people, then maybe they're going to say, we don't think you should be a CoC grant anymore. That's all up to the board to ultimately decide. The performance that HUD looks at when they're evaluating us and whether or not we're doing what we should in the competition and giving us those extra points for doing things like reallocation, it is about, are we hitting good outcomes? Are we evaluating projects on their outcomes? So when we talk about the renewal project application, that's why you see outcomes-based questions, and about their expenditures. So that performance is not just about whether or not you have a lot of great exits or a lot of people getting income or whatever. It is also about how well you're spending. And then the other thing to just know is that when we don't spend money on the CoC grant, that money goes back to HUD. That money doesn't stay in the state of Indiana. It goes back to HUD, and HUD can hold that money for so long before it will do, certain types of things. Like we just had that supplemental NOFO competition last year. That money that was there to send out to projects was actually there because people sent money back to HUD. So anytime we don't spend money, that money goes back to HUD. It doesn't serve people in our communities. It's not recaptured like it is an ESG to then be doled out again in the future. And then, like I said, the HUD funding process, because it is competitive, if we never reallocate to anybody, HUD will start looking at us to say, like, wow, you've got a project over here that's only, drawing down 25% of its money and you continue to fund it at the same rate. Is this a good performing project? Maybe we need to ask some tougher questions here. And I can tell you this personally as somebody who was a part of a continuum of care in Indianapolis that lost money because we did not reallocate to underperforming projects, that it can happen. We lost $2 million in Indianapolis. Now, we are nowhere near that happening here in Indiana, not even close. But I'm just telling you that to kind of make you aware that things can happen. And HUD, because even though the board can decide, like, our agencies are giving us all this great information about what's going on in their communities, and they need this money. If this goes on for 5 or 6 years and the board never makes any changes, HUD can decide for us, because HUD ultimately makes the decision about what grants are funded and at what rate. So just kind of wanted to find some things again specifically for you guys, because you're a part of these larger grants, and they look a little bit different for you. And since you guys are new to the competition relatively in the last couple of years, some of this stuff may or may not have been known to you. So first, as a part of the competition, the board every year approves a set of policies, and one of those policies is the ranking policy. So the ranking policy says that all projects must be scored. So all projects receive a score, and that score does create a ranking. But because we have projects that are under one grant, projects that are under the same grant are actually ranked together. And we'll talk about what that looks like in a second. But because let's say we've got 10 DV bonus projects, if one of them scores 100 and one of them scores 80, all of the DV bonus projects will be ranked as if they score 100, because you're all under one grant. So that's the bonus to you all, to have that like little cover or cushion for yourself if you have a rough year. That's really nice, right? It's really helpful to have that. But your ranking, and this is kind of this isn't specifically said in the policy, but it's always described in the NOFA. Your ranking determines your likelihood of renewal from HUD. So if we have 70 projects and HUD says we can renew 90% of our funding, those projects that are at the bottom may not be renewed. So that's one reason why we want to make sure folks are aware of these ranking policies, and why your renewal application score, that IRPA score, ties directly to your ranking. So another thing to know, and you may or may not have known this, is that we have required all of you guys to complete the IRPA, because all projects have to have a score. That's in our policies. Everybody has to have a score. But our policies, because of you all being new and then transitioning over from ICADV and not maybe having full year's worth of data at one point in time, your projects have been protected in the CoC competition policies. So in the competition policies, and I'm happy to send out a copy of these, we're going to be kind of going over some of this next week with everybody, but I wanted time to talk about this specifically with you. The competition policies have basically said every project receives a score, every grant is ranked, but if you are a DV bonus project, then your project will be protected and will remain in the portion of our ranking that is not at risk in the competition. So your projects were protected, which was good. As we got used to administering the grants, we do this with all new projects. We protect all new projects, but we've protected the DV bonus ones a little bit longer because of that transition from ICADV in the pandemic. So if you have when you submit your IRPA, your project ranks poorly, you can be asked by the Funding and Resource Committee to provide some feedback about what's going on with your project. We call it a performance improvement plan, or a project improvement plan. It's really just a description of like, hey, this is what's going on with us. This is maybe some areas we're struggling in. And it's just a way for you to provide that information back to the Funding and Resources Committee so that they know what's kind of happening and going on. Having poor performance, regardless of whether you're a DV bonus project or a project with a bunch of other projects under one big grant, we ask this of everybody when they're being competitively ranked. Projects can also choose to voluntarily reallocate funding, and if they do, you get 15 bonus points on the IRPA. So if your project is maybe struggling to spend some money, if you're maybe you're completing your IRPA and you're looking at your outcomes and you're this is not as good as I would have thought. If you reallocate, and there's no threshold, so reallocating any amount of money gets you 15 bonus points on the IRPA. So if that's something that you'd like to do, I think the bonus points are most helpful for projects that are under a single grant. But if that's something that is helpful for you to know, you can get those 15 bonus points if you chose to voluntarily reallocate some of your project. Now, the next two here are, again, project related. So this is something that goes back to that performance improvement plan. If your project has not spent 75% of your award, so that would be what you have been individually awarded under your grant agreement with IHCDA, not the overall TH to RRH or overall rapid rehousing grant, but your individual project. If you've not spent 75%, you could be asked to reallocate 10% of your award that you get from IHCDA. So again, not 10% of the whole grant, but 10% of what you receive. What's going to likely happen is, and you'll see the next one is if you are not at 50%, you could have 25% reallocated. What we see typically happen is projects report their spending through the IRPA process. The board reviews that spending number and essentially we reach out to those projects on behalf of the board. I do, or Jenna and Candace do, and we say, hey, the board, the funding and resource committee of the board is asking for a performance improvement plan related to spending because you didn't meet the 75% or 50% threshold. You're able to provide rationale about what's going on in your agency, what's been going on with your project, and then the board can make the determination about whether or not they do the 10 or 25% reallocation. I've yet to see, like, an across the board, they just decide, no, doesn't matter what anybody submits, we're just reallocating everybody. In most cases, the funding and resource committee very open to receiving that information back and understanding more from the project. And then, like I said, because all DV bonus projects are ranked together based on your highest performing project in the group, your project, though it may, score a 50 on the IRPA, you will be, when it comes time to submit to HUD, whatever the highest performing DV bonus project of your project type was, everybody will be ranked together. So I'll show you that here on the next slide. So this is just an example of a ranking. If you looked at the ranking that went out last year, maybe this looks a little bit familiar, though it doesn't. This is very simplified, right? There's a bunch of other stuff when we send out the IRPA, the project ranking. You see our projects here are ranked by their score. We've got Housing Agency A with grant and project together. So this essentially means that this is one grant that has one project under it. This is Housing Agency B with one grant and one project under it. C, one grant, one project. Then look, we have this DV bonus agency that had a TH to RRH project and it scored a 95. And we have another one down here that scored down here at 9. And these two rapid rehousing projects that scored at 8 and 10 in the ranking. So as it stands right now, if each of these projects were individual grants, each of these projects would stay in the ranking that they were in. As it turns out, what happens is your DV bonus project 2 gets to hop up here with this rapid rehousing TH to RRH project 1. And these two projects, this project hops up here. So what it would look like when we submit it to HUD to you, it just looks like one big grant when we submit it to HUD. But to you, what would happen is your project, if you were this agency down here, if this was your project, you'd be up here. You'd be ranked 4. And this project down here, if you were this rapid rehousing 2, you'd be ranked 8. So instead of being ranked 10, you'd be ranked 8. Instead of being ranked down here at 9, you'd be ranked up at 4. And again, just for clarity, the reason why these other projects now appear is because they were invisible in your ranking before. The ranking went on and on and on through, whatever, 70, and you just didn't see them before. But your DV bonus projects, they all group together under one grant because of the score of the highest performing project. I only have like 2 more slides and then we can ask questions because I know this may be a little bit confusing. So some things I just wanted to let you guys know about. And one other thing that Jenna and I were talking about today is are you thinking about your project and wanting to maybe do some new things? Are you thinking about needing to decrease the size of your project because you've had changes in how things are going for it, or you just for whatever reason, right? Things change, and when you applied for something, maybe stuff looked different than it did when you started. So if it wasn't clear from the earlier slide, when we have money that's reallocated by projects, it becomes available for us to apply for an expansion or a new project. That money is still it's still available in the ranking. So we can add it to a new project if somebody decides that they don't need quite as much, which is another reason why you reallocate money as a strategy for the board from the board's perspective. Because if we only rely on the new money HUD is offering us, that's even more competitive to get than anything else. So using reallocation to help us fund some new projects or to expand a project helps kind of take the pressure off of that funding and helps us retain money overall. So if you decide to reallocate money from your project, then you can make it available to your colleagues. And that's completely up to you to do that if you decide to voluntarily do that. Like I said, there is a process that happens during the competition where the Funding and Resources Committee will also review whether or not things need to be reallocated. But if you voluntarily decide to do that, you get the 15 bonus points on the ERPA, and you're helping out, colleagues across the state who may be looking to expand their funding. If you are thinking about it, feel free to reach out to me or Jenna. We like to have these conversations because we do realize, again, this isn't really cut and dry all the time. It has to do with people. And so it's sometimes just easier to kind of dialogue about stuff, but please connect with us if you're interested. The other thing that I just want to say is that I have heard a lot from Jenna. She's a tremendous advocate for you all in our office, talking about what you all are doing and the needs that you guys are observing out in communities. But I understand that transitional housing to rapid rehousing is a big need in many of our communities for survivors, especially because there's just a really limited housing stock, and that transitional resource helps offer folks stability while they may be locating housing. And I have heard through the process that, if there was more TH to RRH available, my agency would be interested. And while we can't promise anybody money through the competition, whether it's reallocated money or new money, if you are interested in pursuing TH to RRH and we had money reallocated from projects that are maybe underspending, that money could help us fund more TH to RRH. We wouldn't necessarily have to go after new DV bonus competitively to add to the capacity of projects. If we are looking at doing an expansion of TH to RRH under the DV bonus, the large DV bonus project, is that something that you guys want to dialogue about as a group or individually to talk about what that looks like? I'd love to bring our consultant Howard on about how exactly that looks in the HUD terms of things. But, we're open to having that conversation because we have heard that from communities, from you all, that the capacity is limited there. We wish there was more. I'd be interested in pursuing that. And we want to open that door up to say that that's not a closed door. Just because we're only at, 80% of spending on that funding, especially as a balanced estate, we know that sometimes money's just not in the right community or it's with the wrong project type. That's why having these kinds of conversations is helpful to kind of just understanding what people are seeing and how we might make CoC money work for your community and your agency. So like I said, we can't promise anything, but we want to be open to that conversation. The other thing I'll say is, Jenna and I were meeting before this, and I have heard that, we have some survivors out there who have some really tremendous needs, and maybe supportive housing is something that needs to be an option for some folks who are survivors in our community. And maybe the expertise that you have as a DV provider would be helpful as a supportive housing provider too. So if that's something you're thinking about, if you're thinking about supportive housing for domestic violence survivors, supportive housing isn't an eligible DV bonus category. So when it comes to the competition itself, there won't be DV bonus money for survivors, but you can apply for a DV dedicated project through the competition that's not a DV bonus project. And we could talk about what you are thinking as it relates to supportive housing, if that's something you're thinking about and something you're wanting to pursue. So maybe it's you on your own as an agency, maybe it's you partnering with a mental health provider or somebody who's more experienced in supportive housing to bring that resource in. But I just kind of want to open that door to also say, the TH to RRH and the rapid rehousing are eligible under DV bonus. Those are always going to be categories that we see. And if we apply for new money for DV bonus in particular, those TH and RRH categories are there. But there's always the opportunity for you to apply for a CoC grant a regular old CoC grant that serves survivors. There's nothing that can stop us from doing that too. So if that's something you observe as a need, don't feel limited by, oh, it's not called DV, so I can't apply for it. We've had PSH projects that serve survivors across the country and in Indiana in the past. So, it's absolutely possible for you to decide to do something like that. Just like how projects can serve veterans, projects can serve survivors. So if that's something you're curious about, again, reach out to us and let's have that conversation to learn what that might look like. And if maybe you need some more time to plan for that, that's okay. If you're not familiar with the timeline of funding, you submit your renewal project application in early to mid-summer. We typically get the notice from HUD that allows us to submit to them in mid-summer to, well, late summer. We're usually submitting by September is what I mean to say. And we usually then hear about that in the winter. We're pretty late this year in hearing back about renewals. We just had a call with our HUD rep today, and we've been told we should hear in the next couple of weeks, which could mean tomorrow or in a couple of weeks. So they're not allowed to tell us those kinds of things. But that if you're not ready right now, maybe you need to think more about, oh, I need to reallocate, or I want to pursue TH to RRH, or I want to think about supportive housing. If this summer is too soon, just know that if you think about summer 2024, you would not have access to that money until 2025, which is okay. It's the timing of it all, right? It's not always as quickly as quick as we like it to be. So with that, I'll kind of open it up to any questions you guys have. I hope this is helpful to you. Like I said, I know with all of the, various folks who've been at the table, I would appreciate the chance just to, answer questions and hear from you all if you have any concerns. Linda, do you have your hand raised? I'm happy to answer a question if you've got one.
Yeah, I do. I guess a couple things. I've been really struggling, and I've worked a lot with Jenna about ensuring that by the time a client is with us 12 months, they're able to be self-sufficient, if at all possible. And that's really been a huge struggle, and trying to figure out how do you step down, but not step down too quickly so that they fail. I guess I'm wondering now if we should not do that, because we're probably one of the lower ones as far as spending all of our money. So what's better, to extend them more to like a 24-month plan, or to continue to try and step them down to help them become self-sufficient so that they're, able to be on their own? Does that make sense, what I'm asking?
Absolutely. And I'll let Jenna jump in here too if you have any thoughts, Jenna. But Linda, can you just remind me, are you operating a rapid rehousing or a TH to RRH?
Rapid rehousing.
Okay. So folks are eligible for up to 24 months. So you can serve them as, that full time period with rental assistance and services of some kind. So, while I think especially if you have operated emergency solutions grant rapid rehousing, like you may even be used to a shorter time frame than that. I have seen rapid rehousing projects that try and stabilize people in less than 6 months, which is really hard. And so, especially if what you're observing in your community is, a lack of units, a challenge in being able to afford the rents with the employment that they have access to, and you need to extend your time with them. I think that's okay. It's eligible. So give yourself that time. But I also understand from an implementation standpoint that desire, especially if you have a lot of need in your community, to try and serve as many households as possible. So I think it really is a balance. When I've spoken with folks who've operated rapid rehousing for a while, they usually say sometimes that desire to have a shorter time frame is because you've got 4 or 5 families or survivors like waiting in the queue that could also use your help. And so it can be really hard to say like, sorry, I need to serve this one household for longer, and maybe you don't get access. So if what you're observing is that the need is for a longer term assistance, and you feel comfortable kind of balancing that, I totally understand keeping folks in for the entire eligible time frame, if that's what you need to have folks reach that stability. But like I said, I also understand, the pressure you may feel to exit people faster. Well, and it's a implementation challenge.
Yeah, and I guess part of that is knowing what your expectations are, because I guess my thinking is that the more we can serve and the more quickly they can get to self-sufficiency, the better that's going to look to you, but more importantly to HUD, because I understand I've been doing this a long time, not the DV, but just the philosophy is usually the more you spend, the more you can serve, the better, the outcomes are. So that's kind of where my mentality's been. Plus, if you do a 12-month lease and then you put them into another 12-month lease and so that's kind of where my head is. And we've had it is very difficult to find clients that can afford the rental with the income they have. That has been extremely difficult. So I just hesitate to put them into a 24-month program, again, knowing that there's other clients, as you said, that need to be served. So it is a balancing act.
Yeah, and Jenna, if you want to jump in here, from what I understand, you're asked to serve the number of folks households that you signed up for. If there's no punishment or no penalty to serve more, but there is if you serve less, there's also no real reward to serve more other than as long as you're successfully serving them, right? If they have good outcomes, right? So it is kind of how you balance that out. Jenna, do you have any thoughts on that from like kind of your best practice information that you know?
I would also add that when HUD is looking at your performance, they're not looking overall at the amount of people that you serve during the grant year. They're more so looking at what capacity that you're operating at through the year. So if you say that we're going to serve 10 families and that will be 20 clients, they just want to see that you're consistently operating at that capacity of 10 units and 20 clients. So
Okay.
you don't necessarily get any more points for serving more people throughout the year and cycling them through quicker. It's just that you are operating at that capacity that you proposed. And then they're looking at the outcomes of the clients once they're exited. So they want to see positive exits, and they want to see that you are consistently keeping people housed, and operating at that capacity throughout the year.
Okay, that's helpful. Then if I could shift to the question or the comment about supportive housing. We're actually part of a mental health agency. Is it possible to do mixed type of clients? So if there was mental health and domestic violence, knowing that a lot of times mental health and domestic violence are tied together, but if it's, we've got, say we wanted to create a project with 20 units, 10 of them were DV, 10 were mental health, or 10 were DV, 5 were mental health, 5 were substance abuse. Can we do that within a single project?
Yeah, there's nothing that would keep you from doing that. I think the one caveat I will say after I just say this is that, the challenge with supportive housing is that folks have to be chronically homeless. So
Okay.
so maybe this is somebody again with a DV history as opposed to an actively fleeing situation. Maybe it is actively fleeing and they have they've been in a relationship that has had homeless episodes in the past too. So I'm encouraging folks to explore that supportive housing element with just that quick reminder that, and to myself too, that chronic status is always going to be there. But absolutely, we have, and Teresa's raising her hand. I'm sorry, Teresa, you're like my little case study today. So Teresa operates, she's consolidated their rapid rehousing project that serves survivors and non-survivors because of the administrative work of operating all these separate grants. And again, as long as it's the same project type, you could have multiple populations being served there if that's what kind of made sense for your community. I think that the main issue would be as you're moving that forward is thinking about how you're going to take those coordinated entry referrals and how that process might look and making sure that you've got that understanding from your region on how that would work. And
Sure.
that's more of an administrative piece, but there's nothing in HUD regulation or in submitting that project that would, be any issue if you wanted to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Teresa, what's up?
I just was wondering, it's something Jenna said sparked a question that we've had about if we proposed that we would serve, like, let's say 3 large families, 3 medium families, and 4 singles. And then when we're trying to house people, we find that there are a lot of places available for singles, but we can't find any place to place the families in. So we end up housing more singles. We aren't meeting the proposed outcome exactly, but we're serving more people. How is that viewed, and I don't know what we can do about it, honestly. I'm just asking, how does that look on our performance?
Trying to remember how the APR is written there for the utilization. And I think it does ask about households and individuals, doesn't it, Jenna?
Yes.
Yeah.
So it breaks it out and it looks at, I think it's like January, April, September, December, or 4 different months throughout the year that are spaced out. So if you are seeing different needs in your community than what you initially proposed, we would kind of encourage you to reach out to us about that and then maybe think about restructuring the rental assistance that you have. So we had one project this year when I sent out the renewal application just to make sure that everybody was comfortable with the amount of funding that they had and give people an opportunity to change their budgets before funding for this year started. We did have a project where they kind of had the opposite challenge where they are seeing um, larger families. So they wanted to kind of change their budget to reflect that they would be serving more families that have higher bedroom units. So that is something that you could reach out to us about, and then we would restructure that for the following year. And that could kind of balance it out a little bit. And it is also balanced in the fact that there will be 7 other subrecipients under your award as well.
Okay, our issue is not exactly need, it's more need of specific types of housing. Like, we can't find any place to put the families, but we can find places to put the singles. And so that's kind of what happened. And I just have to be honest. I let it get away from me. I wasn't paying attention. We were just happy we were serving people and we kept putting them in. And then we realized we aren't really doing exactly what we said we would do, but there's reason for it. And so, but I will give you a call on that specifically to not take everybody's time, but it is complicated.
Yeah, sure. Well, the other thing I'll just say is that, again, if one of the things as we talk about, especially as we're related to funding utilization, that's one reason why we use that that feedback loop through the performance plan. It's kind of the official tool we use to document some of this stuff so that we have records of, hey, this is why Rachel's agency, things look different than they thought. And that, providing that rationale, if whatever your issue is did result in like an underspending or a poor performance in some area, that's one reason why it really is a conversation. And the other thing I'll just say is I think when it comes to what you see in the grant inventory worksheet, it is unit based. So if you are serving singles, you're probably more likely serving more units in the end. So, there is some of that maybe you make up for in some, if that is a concern, but I see what you're saying. And Jen is exactly right. That's one reason why we like kind of getting some things in advance of the competition. Because the one thing I'll hit on a lot when we get with the big group is that the competition is not really the time to completely redesign your project's budget, right? Stuff's pretty much locked once it's in the grant inventory worksheet a certain way, and we can't make big changes. So that's why we like to do some of that, in advance so that we can get it in, even if sometimes we have to do it twice because even when you ask for it, they don't get it right and you have to do it again anyway. So that's just kind of an aside on that part, but this is a really good question. That's a really good question, Teresa. Anything else? Is it Jonna or Jonah? Jonna?
Jonna.
Jonna, hi.
Yes, you had it right the first time. When you said that, it brought up a question that we have. And first, I want to say, Rachel, thank you for these sessions. They're very helpful to have a full understanding of all of this. We were one that came in late with ICDV, and then the switch happened pretty quickly and just never had a full understanding. So I just want to tell you that first. We appreciate this. And it's helpful to have us separated because even like last week's session, all the stuff you were talking about, I had to remember, okay, we don't do locks. I don't have to, because last year, Jenna, you remember me freaking out. I didn't get this. And so anyway, so thank you. But we, and not knowing what we were doing and very new to all of this, we applied for we are a joint component, transitional rapid rehousing. We applied for all of our units in Madison County just because that's where we're located and we felt we had the capacity to do that. We've seen a need of possibly a unit or two in Hancock County. When in the process would that be appropriate to maybe look at not all of everything in Madison County?
So I don't know, Jenna, what goes into their grant agreement. The way that the eSNAP system that we use to submit what you give us works is that we do use counties to calculate FMR. And I would definitely assume that maybe Hamilton County's FMRs are higher than Madison County's. So that may play into this as a part of this challenge, right? But generally, HUD, when we submit into HUD, if you put in that you're going to serve certain counties and you end up, if it's within your service area to serve more, you can without necessarily having to submit any sort of official approval to HUD. But maybe the FMRs aren't lining up for you. So Jenna, can you specify at all how you've seen folks address that in the past when they're serving different counties, and whether or not, is there anything in our grant agreement with them that says they only serve certain counties?
So in the DV grant agreements, I don't think they specify which county. It is just that the county that you initially specify is how I build your budget when I put them together. So for instance, your rental assistance budget would be built off of Madison County's FMRs. So there's not anything specifically in the grant agreement that would tie you to that. I think we would just have to communicate that they want to serve in a county that I don't think Hancock County is included in the list of counties under the award. So we would probably just have to communicate that. But if you do see clients that are looking for housing that is just like, I think it's within either a 1 or 3 mile radius of Madison County, but it's outside of it. So we are able to authorize you to go outside of the county just a little bit to serve clients. If that is something that you're seeing, you would just have to contact us and then we can give you kind of case by case exception for that. But if in general you are interested in serving more units in Hancock County, then that's something that we can look at updating.
Okay, great.
Yeah. Yeah, I think actually I was just speaking with another agency that does supportive housing that was looking at expanding to new counties. And within, again, that eSNAP's time, when we go into the renewal, I think we're allowed to, we can't reduce the number of units, but we could say take 2 units from one county and put them in another county so that you would potentially get that FMR adjustment in particular if you needed it. So that's maybe one change that we probably could swing during a competition period that would be acceptable, because it's not really changing the number of units or adding dollars for services or anything. It's a good question.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Well, it is 4:01 and I promised, well, I didn't promise anything, but the schedule said 1 hour, so I will hold us to that. If you have any other questions, I'll stay on for a couple of minutes and happy to answer those, but appreciate your time today and hope that you all have a happy Valentine's Day, or Valentine's Day if you're my toddler. It is Valentine's Day today, and I hope you have a great rest of your afternoon. I'm going to go ahead and shut the recording off, but I'll stay on for a few minutes if you need anything.